Welcome to the Two Togs Talk podcast, where two photographers with hundreds of weddings worth of experience give you meaningful insights into what works and what doesn't, reveal juicy wedding nightmares from actual weddings, and what you can do to make your wedding day more magical. He's Garrett, the old pro, who still cries at daddy-daughter dances and who definitely steals an extra cupcake on his way out.
She's Gianna, the young gun, who's always got the extra safety pin or granola bar handy and who is currently planning her own wedding. Together, we can help make your biggest day more memorable, more relaxed, and more personal to you and your vision. Okay, friends. Hey, welcome back to the Two Togs Talk podcast. Today, we have a little bit of a history lesson for you. It's going to be a good time, hopefully. We today are going to spend some time diving into the history of wedding traditions, kind of where they came from, what they mean, and then how we can adjust them to the modern wedding, right? So a lot of the things that we see at a wedding are traditional. When you think of a wedding, you probably think of white dresses and flowers and bridesmaids and cake cutting and all the things that are part of a normal American wedding. Today, we're going to talk to you about where those traditions came from, what they started as, and then what they look like or could look like in this day and age. So anyway, it's going to be a good time.
We did do a lot of research behind this. So this, our information comes from several different sources, and a lot of sources had similar information. We tried to add a little bit of multiple sources information because there's kind of varying ways any of these could be taken. So we'll just kind of go through.
Do you have a favorite wedding tradition?
Oh, man.
Now that you've been to a bunch of these? Or one that's,
I feel like my favorite wedding traditions now are the unique ones, the ones that people have taken and made their own spin on it. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite.
Yeah, I don't think I have a favorite either. I think the cake thing's kind of fun.
The cake's fun.
And it can go a lot of different directions. And it's fun when it's cute. It's not fun when it's aggressive.
Sometimes it's fun to watch.
Sometimes, as an outsider. Like, yeah, that was great. Oh, God. Okay, cool. Well, let's just jump into it. We've got lots of options here. So Gianna's going to talk about how, she's going to talk about,
Yeah, so I'll kind of give you the background on what the tradition is, and then we'll kind of just give you a little bit more information on how it's turned into today. So first off, something that I guess we've talked a lot about, and it kind of goes back and forth whether people do them or whether people don't, and that's the first look. So basically the tradition of the groom not seeing the bride until she's come down the aisle has had a lot of iterations throughout history. And it stems really from the Middle Ages. So back in the day when brides were basically sold off to the groom.
they were worth goats and sheep.
Yes, for some sort of dowry. They would not be allowed to see the groom until they were married. And this was kind of to avoid any last minute cancellations by the groom, making sure that the bride wasn't going to the bride's family wasn't going to be losing all of their money. So basically fathers were just protecting their daughters' dowries and their families' alliances.
This was a business transaction.
It sure was.
Yeah, they totally your parents got together and decided what your cost was and then handed over some sheep and then we went with it.
Yeah, so I guess back then, probably 100% of the time, you wouldn't know what each other looked like until you had your first kiss. So that's at the end of the aisle. And they also used like veils and stuff for secrecy. We'll talk about veils kind of in our next one. But the brides wore the veil to keep their faces hidden until the ceremony. And it's kind of evolved into something a little bit more symbolic. Basically kind of a little bit more anticipation, waiting to see them, which has turned into our modern first look.
So obviously couples today see each other before the wedding, right? There's less sheep involved. And I think that, but this tradition of waiting to see the bride until she comes down the aisle is still very much popular, right? I would say probably 50% of our clients decide to wait until until she walks down the aisle on the wedding day to see her. Many of them are deciding to not see each other at all that day.
Mm-hmm.
We have some that decide that they just want to drive to the venue together, and then they just go get ready in separate places, and then they wait till the end. But I waited when I got married. I waited to see my bride until she came down the aisle, and there's some anticipation there. There's some energy and some nervousness.
Not quite the you've never seen her before nervousness,
Right.
but you've never seen her dressed up in her white dress
I knew what she
before.
looked like. Yeah, I knew what I was getting into for sure. But this idea of what we call a first look, so being able to see your bride and your groom or your groom before the ceremony is a very popular item. Logistically, and we've talked about this in other episodes as well, but there's a lot of benefits, in my opinion, to the first look. The biggest one is that you guys get 5 minutes to yourself on your wedding day, right? We talk about this. Your big day is a lot of pieces of the puzzle. There's a lot of people involved in this thing. It's about you, but very rarely do you get more than like 35 seconds with each other, right?
Yep.
The first look allows you to kind of center yourself. Most times people are exchanging vows or gifts at that point. So that's a great opportunity to take advantage of just a slower time. They kind of duck and cover. We hide them in the corner if we're taking pictures of this kind of stuff. Usually there's a bridesmaid or a mom sticking her head out a window trying to get a good look at the thing as it's happening. Right. But it logistically frees up the rest of the day. You don't have to cram as many things in between the ceremony and the reception. There's lots of cool benefits to it. And so if you're willing to buck a little bit of the tradition, the first look thing is actually a pretty awesome way to go. Again, 50-50 there, right? Some people decide to and some people don't. And there's no right or wrong on that. It just kind of changes the logistics on your day a little bit. One of the big complaints or one of the big hesitancies I think people have about doing a first look is they're like, well, it's going to take some of the power out of that moment of her walking down the aisle, right? I didn't do it personally, so I can't speak to that personally, but I will tell you this. We have seen many a groom who claims to be Mr. Tough Macho Man that doesn't have any emotion, that's not going to, I'm not going to cry I'm not going to cry on my wedding day, be moved to tears. Yes. Even after he's seen her.
Yeah,
right?
There's a lot of times when they've done a first look and they didn't cry during the first look, but when she walks down the aisle, they do end up bawling.
So don't feel like if you decide to do a first look that you're going to lose that energy, that power as you're walking down the aisle. Like there's a power when everybody's around staring and here we go. Like this is
and I've seen some people that are like a little bit hesitant because they don't want them to see like the full dress and everything. Just not wearing their veils. Like if you have like a veil that accompanies your dress, just don't wear the veil during that initial first look. And then when you put it on during the ceremony, it's another level of excitement. It's a different look. It's a little bit
something just a little bit different. Yeah. Just a little bit of an extra piece there.
Yeah.
But anyway, so now that you're not worth sheep or goats anymore, you can decide if you want to see each other or not. Again, there's some logistical benefits, but I think it totally comes down to what your preference is, right, and how it works. So.
Yeah. So on the topic of veils, that is our next piece of history. And so the veil actually dates back to ancient Greece and Rome. And it wasn't traditionally white. It was actually red or brighter in color. And it was used more to protect them from evil spirits and jealous onlookers. So you'll kind of see the theme as we start to go through these about the evil spirits and that sort of thing. But basically, it was said to act as a shield to ward off anything that might disrupt this marriage. That is from one source. Other sources say that it kind of would be like kind of what we were saying with the whole not seeing each other. They would wear really dark and heavy veils because they were often getting married in poorly lit churches, and if they have a really dark veil, they're not going to see their face even more. So it was kind of used for both of those things. But then, like religious traditions have influenced the veil's use. One of our sources was saying that Judaism ceremony, it has the groom place the veil over the bride's head, which was kind of rooted in biblical history and kind of dates back to all of that. And then Catholic weddings have done similar, where the veil symbolizes modesty and purity, and it kind of transitioned from the colored veil to the white veil. One of the biggest influences on that was, I think it was Queen Elizabeth. We talked about that one, or Queen Victoria. She was kind of the trendsetter of the white dress. So
turns out the king and the queen have a big say as to what fashionable is.
yes.
Yeah, I think that's not just in wedding traditions. I think that's in a lot of traditions.
Mm-hmm.
My question in my head that I've been thinking about as you're talking about the veil is, okay, so they're using these to cover these women as they're walking down the aisle, so that nobody, to protect them as they come down. I'm thinking, how many brides have been stolen on the way down the aisle?
Apparently a lot.
Apparently some, to be able to create a tradition out of the thing.
Yeah, I mean that piece of the protecting of the bride from evil spirits or other people is a consistency that we saw through a lot of these traditions.
Right.
So it's kind of funny.
You got any good veil stories from weddings that you've seen?
Oh, there's lots of good veil stories, and it kind of varies on the length of the veil, but I will say people that have the long veils, there is plenty of times throughout the day that they get the good old head yank.
Yeah, you can tell. Yeah, usually it's around family photos when somebody puts their arm around them. They don't go under the veil; they go around the veil, and all of a sudden, their head goes back.
Yep.
I've had multiple brides decide that they wanted to cut their veils.
Mm-hmm.
Just 10 minutes before walking down the aisle, they're like, nah, whatever. I think I want to shorten this thing. So they grab a pair of scissors and they just go to work. I actually had a bride that wanted to trim her veil, let somebody else trim the veil. And the veil matched the outside of the wedding dress fabric, and she ended up putting like a 6-inch cut into the actual wedding dress as she did this. And as soon as she did it, her face just went, and the bride knew it, like heard it, and then could see this girl's face in the mirror and went, "What happened?" Right? And then it just no, it's fine, everything's good. And then it just turned into this big emotional awkward thing. So, pro tip: if you're going to cut your veil on your wedding day,
Don't do it on your head.
Don't do it on your head. Pull it away from your body. Pull it away from the dress. So veils go lots of different directions, right? And I think that there are people. Again, sometimes we see them, sometimes we don't. It's got nothing to do with hiding you and shrouding you and getting you down the aisle in safety. But sometimes it is that piece of the dress that kind of it's the cherry on top, right?
It kind of makes you feel a little bit more like a bride. Like even at the bridal stores when you're trying on dresses, you like the dress, and then when they put the veil on is when the tears start flowing. And you're like, oh, I'm actually a bride.
That's when that's the question that I always ask. I was like, does it feel real now? As soon as the veil goes in, they're like,
Yeah.
Veils come in different shapes, different sizes, different price points. The dress shops have the really nice, elegant kinds. These gals that were trimming theirs with scissors at the event were buying these off of Amazon.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ways to put this thing together. So you can decide how you put that together, but it can be kind of a fun way to just kind of finish the entire ensemble. So,
Yeah,
are you going to wear a veil?
I am.
Nice. I guess one of the other things that we deal with veils a lot of times is the hairstyle, right?
Yeah.
So you have to tailor your hairstyle to being able to wear a veil, and sometimes there's like where all the I'm a guy, so ponytails and stuff don't make sense to me. But there's a place in the back where the veil can lock into, and
sometimes they'll put like a little braid that's hidden underneath all of your hair, and it just kind of makes it a lot easier to slip that in if you're wearing your hair down.
Right.
If your hair up, obviously, it's a lot easier to slip it over a bun or.
Sure. Yeah, and a lot of times it's people using them for the ceremony and then.
Taking it off.
Either some people like to take it off for family photos because they've had their head janked back enough that they're like, I'm done with that. But totally up to you guys on how you put that together. Just
and you can even get the really dark and heavy one if you don't want them to see your face.
Yeah, exactly.
Depends on the mood.
Come walking up and be like, boo, haha.
Yeah, it's like wrong person. Okay, so from there we talk about the white dress. So traditionally. The white wedding dress is often kind of like the symbol of purity, and it wasn't always the traditional choice. So historically, brides kind of just wore their best attire, regardless of the color. But the white was kind of linked to wealth, and it's kind of maintaining its cleanliness was really difficult when we were taking baths once a year. So it's kind of just a luxury that a lot of people couldn't afford. So that's why it wasn't really popular back in the day.
That makes sense.
But then it gained popularity after Queen Victoria decided that she wanted to wear a white gown for her wedding. And she kind of set a trend that just spread so rapidly that everyone wanted that. And then it also just was like, oh, it's the ideal femininity now that Queen Victoria is doing this. Okay. A funny thing that I didn't realize or even think about was the photography standpoint of this. So one of the articles I was reading into was saying that it became really popular because the white dresses stood out more in the photographs. Because back when photos were black and white only, I mean, if you're wearing like a navy blue dress, you kind of just blend in with everyone else in your photo. But if you had the white, bright dress, then everyone else in the photo just kind of looked kind of dark and you stood out. So
Right. That makes sense.
it was a fun alternative. So
I guess if you have any issues with wedding attire and why it's become what it is, just blame the queen.
yeah.
It's her fault. Yeah. So I think the white dress is probably one of the biggest traditions, or at least one of the things that you think about at the beginning of all these processes. We've seen the beauty of the dress part is there's all sorts of options there. And you just going through this process and the dress fittings and all that stuff. I mean, you saw there's white,
Yeah,
there's
they have
cream, there's
so many
ivory,
colors.
there's all these different varieties and versions and whatnot, right? We've done weddings on all sides of the scale, right? From the very elegant down to the, we're just going to go to the courthouse. I got my best looking dress on and off we go, right?
It still is a stylistic choice, I'd say, because we've had several brides even recently wear black wedding dresses, and that's
Right.
kind of become a new trend, just to be different, to stand out and kind of flip the tradition on its head and
Right.
make it your own.
It takes the right personality. The two people that I remember having different colored dresses like that definitely had the personality to
Oh,
fit
yeah.
that, right? One was a Halloween wedding. I was like, why would you
Yeah.
wear white on a Halloween
Right.
wedding? Like, wear black. This is awesome. So yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of different directions you can go with that. Understand as you get one of the things that just popped into my head about dresses. They start white by the end of the night. By the end of the night, they're not white anymore. There's lots of ways to preserve them. There's lots of ways to get them cleaned. I know that my wife has hers we've got hers hanging downstairs in a closet, but it's protected. It's been cleaned, dry cleaned, and all the things there. They've got some really cool ways to preserve them. We've seen a lot of people using them. Maybe we can talk about this later as other pieces of the traditional puzzle here. But there's other ways. I've seen lots of like grandchildren wear grandma's dress, or reuse mother's dress, or whatnot.
Reuse pieces of it, or have it. We've seen them like just bring it. Like maybe they're not going to wear it, but they had it laid out at the wedding to kind of symbolize like this is where it all started.
We had one. I remember one gal that she was the third woman in her family to wear the same dress. It started with I think it started with grandma or great grandma.
Yeah.
And every time they had made alterations to this thing, so it started as one dress, and then they kind of worked their, it got down to her, and she's like, I basically took this to the seamstress, and she said, I think we're running out of options with this. Like, we're getting to the very end of this thing. But what a cool way to like pay homage down the line to this whole thing, right? So anyway, lots of cool ways to do it. Understand that white is traditional, but white does not mean that it has to be, it doesn't have to be that way. If you decide that something else is your way, if you want to go into some more of they've got beiges, they've got the ivories, they've got
like the rosy colors. I don't know the names of these, and I probably should,
Right.
but yeah, they have lots of color options. You can mix and match. Like that was one of the fun parts about going into the wedding store or the bridal store, was that you could put on a dress and it was stark white, and you're like, well, maybe I'd like it to be a little bit different. They can like switch and swap colors and order it in the pink version or the brown version. So there's lots of different variations on all of those things.
So anyway, cool.
Yeah. Okay. Now kind of getting more towards the ceremony here. The tradition of giving away the bride. So kind of nowadays we're seeing fathers typically walk their brides down the aisle, and that was pretty much the same as back in old times. But it was a very like an emotional moment. But truly, in medieval times, where women were considered property, and marriages were business transactions. So the fathers, when they gave away their daughters, it was more of an exchange for dowries. They're getting paid, and they're now passing ownership to the groom.
So were they handing off like goats and cash like right there, or that probably was done separately?
I think it was done separately, but
could you imagine walking down the end of the aisle and
Just
then your
got two
dad just hands
goats.
a briefcase over, and then you're okay,
Like,
good, she's
okay.
yours now.
see ya.
That would be bad.
Yeah. But yeah, then it kind of basically evolved into a more symbolic gesture. Fathers giving the blessing, handing him over to the next man that's going to take care of her,
Right.
not necessarily for purchase.
That's usually one of the things that comes out of the officiant right at the very beginning. Who gives this woman to be wed? Or, so yeah, very traditional, very what's the word I'm looking for?
Symbolic?
Very symbolic. Yes. So
Yeah, there's not a whole lot to that one. That one kind of is self-explanatory, but interesting, I guess, if you want to remember that women were used to be paid
a commodity.
paid for.
Yeah. The tradition is father, but we've seen lots of options, right? I mean, sometimes it's siblings that walk you down the aisle. Sometimes it's mom. Sometimes it's an uncle. Grandparents are a great option sometimes to do all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, you also don't need anyone to walk you down. I've seen plenty of weddings where the bride just walks down by herself too.
for sure. Yeah. There's lots of different ways to do this. So when putting this together, obviously it's, as a father, I would hope to be a part of this at some point, right? Like I can already tell that that's going to be a very emotional part of my life, but, dads aren't the only option, right? If you have other options, or if you want to bring in, brothers or mothers or siblings or whatever, right? I mean, there's all sorts of other ways to do it. So.
Okay.
If you haven't figured that out by now in this podcast, here's the tradition and here's what it means. Do it your way, right?
Yeah,
like
truly.
There's lots of ways to put this stuff together.
Some of these are just fun, and I'm glad that you guys get to learn this, because when I learned it, I was shocked.
Right.
So the next two are the ones that truly shocked me. And it is the origins of bridesmaids, maids of honor, and groomsmen.
Ooh, let's go.
And I'll kind of combine them. Well, no, I'll separate them just to make them a little bit easier to digest. But so basically, bridesmaids originated as a defense against jealous suitors and spirits, evil spirits.
So brides were getting stolen. And
They truly
had
were.
to have your friends around to beat up whoever was going to come take you on
Yeah.
your wedding day.
But they're kind of more. The funnier part is they would. So I guess nowadays you see the bridesmaids in a different color dress than their bride. But back in the day, they would all wear pretty much the same thing, and it was to confuse
like a
people.
diversion
So
tactic.
yeah, it was literally a diversion tactic.
Yeah.
So if someone was coming to steal the bride, bridesmaids, maids of honor were the ones that they would.
Haha, you got a
Yeah.
bridesmaid instead. Joke's on you.
Exactly. And that was kind of just protecting the bride's dowry again. But so the maid of honor is now, I mean, typically best friend. And it was the same back then, but they had kind of the most responsibility of this whole thing. And it was literally safeguarding her, assisting her in everything that she needed, and even risking her own personal safety when it became necessary.
Did you have to pick the bridesmaid that looks the most like you as your brides or as your
don't
maid of
know.
honor, just so that if
That
somebody
would
did come to steal
probably
you,
be a
they
good
would
idea.
have to have a do a fit. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't see anything on that one, unfortunately. But, and then, so the bridesmaids is pretty kind of traditional, other than the fact that the bridesmaids were literally the bride's maids. So
Got it.
mostly comes from like their milkmaid, like the people that would help them around the house,
Right.
back in the times where that was a legal thing. But yeah, it also kind of stemmed from the story of Jacob in the Bible. Basically they had to be escorted to the wedding, and they were basically just catered to the bride's every needs on the day, kind of just a servant. But now thankfully they're just a group of friends.
Yeah. So now you don't have to have lookalikes on your wedding day, because you're most likely not going to get stolen on your wedding day. One of the big traditions in bridesmaids culture at this point is to have, do you get matching dresses? Do you not? Right. There are so many cool options for that. And it used to be such that everybody wanted everybody to look the same, right? So all the bridesmaids had the exact same dress, the exact same color. Some of the most classy events that I've been to kind of give them options and say, hey, here's a color scheme, stay within that. Hey, we're doing light greens. Okay, good. And then everybody's got kind of a different shade of that. There was a trend for a long time, and I think it still is going strong a little bit with, not every dress has to be the same cut or the same shape. You've got different types of people that are around, and
Yeah,
all this
I
stuff.
feel like that's become a lot bigger thing more recently, just because the whole stigma behind the bridesmaids dresses are ugly. No one likes to wear the bridesmaids dresses.
You pay a bunch of money for a dress that you wear one day, and then it just sits in
Yeah.
your closet and you never use it again, kind of deal, right? So the idea that, you have different styles that all could be in the same color, or different styles that are all in the same kind of color scheme, has been a really cool addition. And I don't think it adds a pretty cool component to the day, especially from a photos perspective.
Yeah.
And I would imagine, I mean, my wife and people around me have been in weddings enough to where it's an honor to be included in somebody's wedding like that, right? But sometimes the financial burden of, God, I got to buy this dress, and I got to buy like cool.
And then I got to buy the shoes.
I got to buy this stuff, and then I'm never going to wear it again.
Mm-hmm.
It's all going to be something like, I would never wear this. Yes, it's what she wants, but that's not what I would wear ever again, right? So giving your bridesmaids an option, or giving them some suggestions. Hey, here's a color scheme. Let's stay inside of that. Here's a style. I think that's becoming a lot more popular, where it doesn't have to be cookie cutter, same exact dress. The one girl likes the fit of it, and the other girl's like, dude, this doesn't fit me at all. So it's just, you don't have to be lookalikes on your wedding day anymore, because
we're no longer trying to fight off people.
Weird spirits.
So the groomsmen one is much more fun. So that one is a little bit more dramatic than their modern role. Typically now they're supportive friends, but back in the old day, the bride-to-be was required to receive her family's permission to marry. But if it didn't occur, the bride would then be forcibly removed from her home by a group of groomsmen, and they were called bride knights back in the day. So basically, the practice was known as marriage by capture. So basically, if you didn't show up to your wedding, you're going to come get kidnapped, and
this was the mafia
show up anyways.
Coming to your door to say, you're coming with us.
Yeah. And so they were the groom's army, and they would literally fight off the bride's relatives or anyone that could be like trying to take the bride away from this marriage. So yeah, super fun on that one. But the best man, it wasn't just the best friend on his side. It was the best performer in combat.
Right.
So the best person with their sword would be the best man, and they would stand next to the groom on his wedding day, similar to today. But he would be standing there with his hand on his sword, ready to anyone that got in the way.
And that actually goes back to, I think I read this at one point, talking about why the bride is on a certain side, why she's on the left versus on the right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It all had to do with the direction that the sword would come out. Right. Mm-hmm. So you would have to, you were more effective and you were quicker on the draw when you drew the sword the one direction. So that's why traditionally the girls are on the left.
Well, and if you were on the left with the groom, if you pulled your sword, you'd slice the groom.
Yeah, you'd hit him first. Yeah, so this way
the right side.
Right. See, that's
easiest access.
Right. So next time you're wearing your sword,
super fun.
Next time you're wearing your sword at your wedding, make sure you're on the correct side.
Yeah.
Not to stab anybody. I think we should bring this back. I think we should call them bride knights more.
I agree. I kind of
groomsmen,
like it.
It's like, okay, cool. But like
bride knights.
Bride knights, like
yes.
I think they would dig into that more.
Oh yeah, they'd go way into it. And the funny part was we had a consult literally the other day, and I had just researched all this, thought it was like the craziest stuff. No way does this still happen. And this man was from was Ireland? Finland. And he was telling us that this actually still happens. Not necessarily like the killing of people, but the whole
they
kidnapping.
Leave their swords in the sheath.
Yeah, they don't have the swords, but they do actually still kidnap the bride the night before the wedding or the day of the wedding to make sure that she shows up. So
they've made it a cute little ceremonial thing now to kind of pay homage to this, but it's definitely not like.
It's not like the blindfold shove her in a van and well, it probably still is, but less aggressive with the intent behind it.
As far as the groomsmen in the modern day wedding, I mean, there are a lot of cool pieces as to why they're there now. They're a great help on the wedding day most of the time, right? You get a bunch of dudes together, you can put a bunch of chairs out or get a bunch of tables removed in a big sort of hurry. Most of the guys are there for, again, they want to be there to help celebrate for the guy, but they also, they understand that their role is to help and be logistical guys. I guess kind of going down that same thread as we did with the girls, as far as attire going, right? You don't have to be everybody in a black tuxedo. It doesn't have to be all matching suits. Some of the coolest things that I've seen with this is allowing again, giving them a color scheme and saying, hey, groomsmen, go buy a suit that you would wear, go buy a pair of shoes that are roughly this color, and then here we go, right?
Yeah, especially is what I'm realizing now that we're kind of in the hunt for tuxedos and everything, is they are so expensive, especially to buy, but even to rent. Like there's still a couple $100 to rent for the day. Right. So, and then when you're renting too, you have to be a lot more careful. Don't jump in pools.
There's deposits that come back or don't, depending on how you treat them.
Ripping things. So just being a little more cognizant about letting them pick something that maybe if they will wear it again, then maybe they'll want to buy it and it'll be a better purchase than to spend $250 on something that you're going to wear that day and return the next. So.
Right. Yeah. And I always laugh at the groomsmen when I always laugh at the bride nights when they are, they've got the fake ties, the bow ties or whatever that just come around their neck and they tie them together. You would get more custom. You would be able to have something that you would use down the road by giving them some options there. Not to say that, renting tuxedos and renting suits is a bad idea. If you, it's good stuff, right? So I think from an attire's perspective, I think giving them options and giving them loose guidelines as opposed to like, here's the exact color, here's the exact fit, here's the exact shoes. I think we're seeing more and more of that as we go into this, just for lots of reasons, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times when like a friend group is you got your good friend group, you're going to have multiple weddings where a lot of the groomsmen are similar throughout.
Right.
Let them reuse stuff.
Sure.
Like, oh, we just had my buddy's friend 3 weeks ago and I used these shoes and this belt and this shirt. Like, reuse stuff. Don't replace everything.
I think a really funny thing about bridesmaids and groomsmen is there seems to be, in every wedding, there seems to be one of the spouses that has like, it's really easy to, I can find 8 or 10 groomsmen. I can find, and then the other one's usually like, I only have like 3 friends. Like, how do I put this together? Right.
That was exactly what happened with us. And I will say that I probably shouldn't have been as about it, but I wanted even on both sides.
Right.
Which is, it's very based on choice, and I just like symmetry, so I wanted the even. But we see weddings all the time that have different number of groomsmen than the bridesmaids, and they have like a couple groomsmen walk down the one girl or stuff. So it doesn't have to be even, and it doesn't have to be like, don't have people in your wedding party that shouldn't be in your wedding party that you don't know very well.
Just to find a number. I laugh because it was kind of the same thing, and nothing against the guys that I had in there, because I had buddies and we put some good people in our wedding, but for my wife it was very smooth and easy. She's like, oh yeah, I got 6 people, no problem. And I was like, well, I got like 4. So you got any extra brothers or cousins or somebody random I can throw in here? Sorry, brothers, I didn't mean to like throw you under the bus there. We wanted you involved too, but there is that idea of having to have the same amount, and you don't have to, right? There are times if your photographer has a little bit of engineering brain or OCD about symmetry, it might drive them a little nuts, but who cares, right? Again, this day is about bringing the most important people in your life together, and it's not a quantity based competition, right?
Yeah, or if you're really obnoxious like myself and you need the numbers to match, you can make your groom have groomsmen that aren't technically groomsmen and they do other things, but they're still involved in the day and they still dress the same as everyone else and they get their special role, but they're not standing up with you at the altar so that you can still have the symmetry at your altar.
There you go. Yeah. We don't have to copy paste.
We've designated some beer boys and some flower boys to be extras.
Ushers are usually really popular, right? And they usually do almost everything but stand up for the wedding, right? They're
exactly.
They're in the getting ready stuff. They're doing the drinking with everybody. They're their dance floor and everything.
They're honorary.
Yeah. So
bride nights.
Yes. Gosh, we're bringing.
Can we bring this back?
I think we should. It just gives us more excuses to wear Batman costumes to these things.
Exactly.
Anyway. Hopefully you guys are enjoying our history lesson and our perspective on traditional versus modern weddings. I think this is a great time to kind of cut it into halves here, because we've got a couple other things that we want to talk to, but it would be good to kind of split these up and give you some time to digest this stuff. Again, the takeaway, I guess, from the modern weddings perspective is, here's what these things have been in the past. That doesn't mean that that's the way they have to be in the future, right? Or as you put your wedding together. Yes,
you could be the next Queen Victoria and make your own thing and make everyone else follow you.
Yeah, see, right? So I guess our takeaway for this is understand where they started, understand what they've done in the past, understand that there are some pieces of the day that make it kind of structured in a way that makes it feel special, but don't feel like you have to do anything that they've done in the past, right? Put your own spin on it. That's our favorite part of the day, or our favorite types of days are those that people put their fingerprint on it, right? And decide to either buck tradition or just completely remove a tradition.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Anyway, we'll come back again. Thanks for your time. Two Togs podcast out. Cue the pink button.
See ya. Bye. That was awkward.
Yeah.
Awkward pause.
Just gotta remember where the slider button is.
Yup.
So how many goats do you think you'd be worth?
I'd hope at least one. The funnier part is Caleb literally, I was telling him about this and he goes, yeah, I could maybe trade a goat for you. I was like, thank you. Appreciate that so much. All right, sweet.
Want your questions answered on the podcast? Are you newly married or engaged, or are you a wedding vendor wanting to be a guest on the show? Want weekly tips and insights sent right to your inbox? Send us a message at www.floatingleafstudios.com/2togspodcast.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.